when explanation finally stopped. For centuries, explanation always felt temporary. Another layer waited beneath. Another answer was coming. Physics advanced by replacing mystery with mechanism. When something seemed unclear, it was assumed to be incomplete. Better tools, deeper theories, sharper equations would eventually finish the job. Explanation was a process that never truly ended. To understand why this confidence finally broke, we need to see how deeply it was earned. Every major mystery had eventually yielded. Motion, heat, light, matter, the fundamental forces of nature. Each had resisted understanding for a time, sometimes for centuries, before succumbing to persistent application of human ingenuity and experimental method. Motion, heat, light, matter. Each time, what once felt unknowable became precise. Progress trained expectation. This built a quiet assumption that every question had an answer waiting below it, that confusion meant ignorance, not impossibility. Every barrier to understanding was assumed to be temporary, a reflection of the current state of knowledge rather than a permanent feature of the landscape of reality. That explanation was infinite in depth, but as physics approached its most fundamental layers, something strange happened. The questions did not get harder. They became ill-defined, not unanswered, but unaskable in the old way. The tools still worked. The predictions still held. The mathematical frameworks continued to produce accurate forecasts of experimental outcomes. But the deeper layer of understanding, the sense that one comprehended why the laws took the form they did, ceased to deepen. But explanation stopped deepening. At first, this was subtle. Theories grew more abstract. Principles replaced pictures. Mathematics carried meaning that language struggled to express. The concepts being described had moved so far from everyday experience that the usual tools of human understanding, analogy, visualization, and narrative could no longer keep pace with the formalism. Understanding shifted from intuition to structure. Then the pattern became clear. Certain explanations did not exist, not because they were hidden, but because nothing deeper remained to explain them with. The laws worked, but they did not point beyond themselves. This was the first sign that explanation might have a boundary, not a failure point, but an edge, a place where asking why no longer produced more detail, only repetition. When explanation finally stopped, physics did not collapse. It stabilized, and that stabilization would force a final reconsideration of what understanding actually means. At first, physicists resisted this conclusion. Surely explanation had not ended. It must have changed form. Perhaps a deeper theory waited beyond current models, one that would finally justify the rules themselves. But every attempt followed the same pattern. New frameworks refined predictions without deepening meaning. Equations became more powerful, yet no longer answered additional why questions. The mathematical frameworks grew more elegant, more comprehensive, and more precise, yet the additional precision did not come with additional depth. The equations describe behavior with extraordinary accuracy, while remaining silent about the reasons that behavior took the particular form it did. They describe behavior perfectly while remaining silent about origin. This created a deep conflict. Physics had always advanced by reduction, by explaining complex phenomena in terms of simpler ones. Now it had reached structures that could not be reduced further. There was nothing underneath them to appeal to. As this became clear, explanation shifted from depth to consistency. The goal was no longer to explain laws by deeper laws, but to ensure that all laws fit together, without contradiction. Coherence replaced origin as a measure of success. Emotionally, this was difficult to accept. It felt like stopping short, like leaving the story unfinished. But physics showed that the story did not end abruptly. It looped. Explanations began referring back to themselves. The laws worked because they worked, not as a tautology, but as a structural fact. They were stable, self-consistent, and complete within their domain. Asking why they existed no longer produced information. By this point, explanation had not failed. It had reached its natural boundary, a place where description remains possible, but justification does not deepen. Physics could still describe what happened with extraordinary precision, but the question of why those particular descriptions held, rather than any of the countless alternatives, no longer had a meaningful answer. And standing at that boundary forced physics to confront a final question, not about the universe, but about understanding itself. The conflict sharpened when physicists realized this boundary was not temporary. It was not waiting for better mathematics or new experiments. It appeared no matter how the theories were rearranged. Explanation always stopped at the same place. This buildup revealed a quiet but radical shift. Physics was no longer uncovering reasons. It was uncovering constraints. The deepest laws did not explain why reality existed the way it did. They defined how it could exist at all. Attempts to push past this point produced repetition. New symbols expressed the same structure. New languages described the same limits. Progress continued, but depth did not increase. The universe allowed refinement, not replacement. Emotionally, this was unsettling. Science had always moved forward by answering questions. Here, the answer circled back. The universe did not offer a deeper foundation. It offered stability. By this point, the idea of a final explanation began to dissolve. There was no ultimate reason beneath the laws. There was only consistency. The universe worked because it could work no other way without contradiction. This forced a change in how understanding was measured, not by how far explanation went, but by how little it needed to assume. The fewer assumptions required, the closer physics came to its boundary. When explanation finally stopped, it did not reveal ignorance. It revealed completeness. And that completeness carried a different kind of meaning than anyone had expected. The climax of this story is not disappointment. It is acceptance. Explanation did not stop because physics failed. It stopped because there was nothing left to explain beneath what already worked. Once this is understood, the boundary stops feeling like a wall. It becomes a foundation. The laws of physics do not point to deeper causes because they are the deepest structure that can exist without contradiction. They are not explained by something else. They explain everything else. This realization reshaped what understanding means. Knowledge is not infinite descent. It is closure, a place where further questions no longer add clarity, only repetition. The universe does not hide reasons forever. It eventually offers rules that simply are. More deeply, it reshaped humility. Humans are wired to ask why endlessly. Physics revealed that some whys dissolve into structure, not because answers are forbidden, but because explanation has reached equilibrium. Today, this boundary still stands. Physics continues to refine, connect, and extend, but it no longer expects a final reason beneath the laws themselves. The search for ever deeper explanations, which had driven physics for centuries, has been replaced by the recognition that depth has a limit, and that reaching that limit is not a failure but an achievement. Consistency has replaced origin. Coherence has replaced purpose. When explanation finally stopped, the universe did not become mysterious again. It became honest. It showed that understanding has limits, and that those limits are not failures. They are where meaning changes form, not from something into nothing, but from one kind of understanding into another. The pursuit of ever deeper explanation gives way to the appreciation of structure, consistency, and the remarkable fact that the universe is comprehensible at all. Subscribe to join the journey.